we've been here a while, and sometimes I'm a little awkward in terms of talking about our business simply because some hold us up as the poster child for a small family farm that has continued to exist, that is changed and adapted to increasingly urban environment. And well, I welcome those accolades. There are some issues that I have to deal with, and it does affect the long-term viability of our farm. We're part of the history of Santa Clara County, so a little bit of history. Our family is probably one of the first refugees of the early siliconization of the valley. We had a small farmstead in Cupertino, and now it's across the street from the headquarters of Apple Computer on Danza Boulevard. We sold out the development in 1957. We moved here in 1958, so we've been here about 60 years. When we first moved here, there's a good 25, 30 small family farms surrounding us in northeast Morgan Hill. And they were all family owned and operated. They were freeholders. In other words, they owned their own land, and they're small parcels. They were able to make a living on usually growing commodity fruit like apricots and prunes and drying them. Apricots and prunes were very adaptable to drying because of their dryway ratio. And the Santa Clara Valley became famous for its dried fruit. The reason why was because this valley was so productive. It's if you compare it to the Salinas Valley today, Salinas Valley is considered the most productive land on earth. They have 2 crops usually a year, and they have the soil, the climate, and the infrastructure to be so productive. In its day, the Santa Clara Valley was very similar. It had the soil, the climate, and the infrastructure. We had a lot of dry yards, we had a lot of canneries, and we had the establishment of the Intercontinental Railroad in the late 1800s and early 1900s, which allowed us to farm a lot of fruit, a lot of produce, and send it to distant markets. You can't with so much produce that was available, you could not market it as fresh fruit locally. There just wasn't enough markets. So you had to transform that fresh product into a more durable form, and this is where the drying and to a certain extent the canning came in. And there is a kind of a rule of thumb, or I guess a measure of profitability is the dryway ratio. So the more yield you get of dried fruit from your fresh fruit, the more profitable you are, the more revenue you get. So, in other words, with Blenheim apricots, it's usually 5 pounds of fresh fruit will yield 1 pound of dry. But if it takes 5.5 pounds to yield that 1 pound of dry, you're losing profit. So there was a built-in incentive to grow fruit of high quality with high sugar content and tree ripen. And that's important because I'll get to that later. Do I have this? Okay, I'll jump in. All right, this is something I came across. This is Morgan Hill, Santa Clara County, California. This was in 1915. It says Morgan Hill invites the world. That was a bold statement, I think, at that time. They were interested in attracting settlers to the Morgan Hill, which is basically all bare land at that point, and having them start up farms. And this was sponsored by the Morgan Hill Board of Trade in 1915. Now, I would assume that that's kind of like what your function is now as a Chamber of Commerce. It was the again it was the railroads, but then later on there was no system of highways until the Eisenhower administration, a national system of highways. So we didn't have that until later. We had the railheads and we had turn it. Okay. Okay. So anyway, we talked about drying, and you can see there was fields and fields of dryers. There's also canneries and packing facilities and railheads. Usually the the produce came in on horse and wagon and other rudimentary vehicles, and then they went to the railhead, and then also to San Francisco, the port of San Francisco, and we had a worldwide market for our dried fruit because it was not perishable and it lasted at least a year. You could put it in the hold of a ship, send it to Europe, took 6 months, and it was still a viable product in the end. This is a far cry from what is happening today. In the 1950s, a new industry was actually developed as the Santa Clara Valley was transformed to Silicon Valley. The new industry was basically fresh food marketing, and mostly centered in the Central Valley. You had the advent of refrigeration and refrigerated trucks. So then these are now like fruit factories. They're developing. They're growing a lot of fruit, putting them on the refrigerated trucks and sending them all over the country. It's become a commodity. They've made changes in varieties to make them firmer, to develop color on the fruit so they can hide the blemishes, because usually the older varieties of fruit were always blemished. And now this is kind of the standard supermarket quality that you're used to if you go to the grocery store. We never kind of bought into that framework because we went from fruit drying, where quality was important, to specialty crops. So we kind of bypassed that whole thing. So Annie's Orchard, basically we've shifted from commodity like Blenheim apricots and French prunes, which were mostly grown in the valley, to more diverse crops. In other words, a lot of different varieties, and also having it tree ripe. This is how we differentiate our product from what you can find in the grocery store. Now we have also a farm stand where we sell our fruit, and the whole idea there is to cut out the middleman and all the other costs that are involved. However, it turns out that there's a lot of overhead with retail anyway. So I'm not sure how that goes, but you know, the consumers, for every dollar the consumer spends on fresh fruit, most of it goes to packaging, transportation, and storage. So what we're trying to do is cut that out and sell it locally. Now, again, as it was the case in the past, you could not sell all your fruit locally. So we have other outlets that we have to depend on. We have global markets, for example, for our cherries. They go to a packer in the Stockton area, and they ship them all over the world. We've developed some other strategies. I call them survival strategies, because these are things that my parents would never have thought of. You know, but basically they grew their fruit and they dried it and they put it on the truck and sent it to market. But now we have to think about how to generate revenue and not be totally dependent on the production of the farm. So we hit on fruit tastings. It's kind of like wine tasting, but it's fresh fruit. And because we grow so many different varieties, it's kind of interesting for people to come and taste our fruit. They call it agritourism. I think that term is used inaccurately. Here in the United States, it originated in Italy, and it's a completely different concept. You know, some people call it pumpkin patch agritourism. It's actually just an amusement park. It's a little bit different. But anyway, we do the fruit tasting. We have a cover charge, and we allow the kids to come in free, and the adults have a cover charge, and then there's a senior citizen discount. These are fairly popular. We get as many as 500 participants at any given time. Probably about 5 times a year. We start out On Father's Day with cherries, and then we go through the whole gamut. We go with cherries, apricots, peaches, nectarines, plums. This is a slide of our orchard tours and and some U-pick. U-pick is we call it a harvest walk. It's a thinly veiled version of U-pick, and again, people will pick the fruit and they'll buy it, and they're not concerned about the maturity of the fruit so much, because they really aren't that good at picking, and about cosmetic issues and all that. So you basically cut out the cost of sorting and cut out the cost of packing, and you can pass that along to the person who's picking it. Again, this is part of a package. We have the fruit tasting, and after that we have the orchard tours and the U-pick. Again, a more modern strategy, a more modern way of looking at family farms and how best to generate some revenue besides just what you make in the production of your fruit. Farmers markets. And this is something that people question sometimes, because when we go to one farmer's market, Santa Monica, it's arguably the best market in the whole nation, the largest market in the whole nation. And it's not just a farmer's market where you go there and put your fruit on the table and kind of peddle it. And then hopefully people come and buy your fruit. Our van holds about 500 cartons of fruit, and we fill it up completely, and 95% of it is pre-sold. We sell it to fruit purveyors that turn around and sell it to the fancy food stores and hotels and the restaurants in the LA area. So it's a lot different than even a lot of the farmers markets here in the Bay Area. And we spend only about an hour with the rest of the fruit, the remainder of the fruit that's on the van, and sell out and leave. And so we're there for only a few hours. And that is profitable for us. There's a lot of inefficiencies in terms of going to different farmers markets, and so we try to avoid that if we can. The other thing we do is we try to concentrate on heirloom fruits, because they're kind of fruits that were developed mostly for flavor, whereas the newer varieties that are adapted to the kind of mass production and mass marketing that I was talking about that goes to retail stores, they're concerned with appearance, firmness, and shelf life. Heirloom varieties tend to be very delicate and flavorful, and so we pick and choose what we want, and it's always based on the flavor of the fruit. And so our reputation is for having really high flavor. In some cases, like the baby Crawford there on the left, that's something I happened to find that has been around for a while, fairly obscure variety, but we made it into one of our signature fruits because it tastes so good. The green gauge plum is also, it's the finest and most popular market plum in Europe. Nobody grows it over here in California, yet it can be grown. A little difficult, but we can grow it. So we decided to grow that too. Some of these, like the green gauge plum, we had a good crop this year. We're getting $9 a pound for it at the farmer's market, and that's really good. I mean, then we decided we're going to develop some of our own fruits too that are adaptable to Santa Clara Valley conditions, yet are something special. On the lower left is something called raspberry red nectarine. It's a red flesh nectarine. Very interesting. It has a very unique flavor, and we can't keep it in stock. As soon as we send them down to the Santa Monica market, they're gone. As soon as we put them in our retail stores, they're gone. The next one is an all golden yellow nectarine that we also developed, and is one of the most popular nectarines in the market down in Santa Monica. Secondary products. One of the things is we're trying to develop a brand. That's one of the strategies, and when we do, we try to use our fruit to create value-added products, and then sell it at our store, or the people that make it sell it, and they advertise our fruit. So these are, we have pies that are made by a lady in San Jose. She's an artisan baker, and she does an excellent job using our fruit. She turns around and sells it back to us, wholesale, and then we sell it, and we advertise it as pies made with our fruit. The same is true with the ice cream there. That's a Flavor King Pluot. It's an outstanding sorbet. It's made by Revival Ice Cream in Monterey. They get our fruit, make it, and turn around and sell it back to us. Also, I didn't bring a bottle, but I have one of the things that they use is secondary fruit. In other words, fruit that is cosmetically challenged. One of the problems when you grow heirloom fruits is that the newer varieties of fruit that are mass produced are developed so that they have less cullage, or in other words, stuff that is not marked or disfigured or whatever. We get a lot of that because it's one of the prices we have to pay for growing these heirloom varieties. We have a lot of that. So we have to try and sell that, and we usually sell it for half the price of the number one fruit, but that's still a good return. If you sell your peaches for $6 a pound and you sell your seconds for $3 a pound, you're still doing okay. Now, this is just a picture because I didn't bring a bottle. This is a beer. They call it a sour beer. I guess there's craft beers that are being developed now, and they want to use fruit to kind of flavor them. And this particular one is called Ellipsis, and it has right on the front label, it says, made with Andy's Orchard Black Tartarian cherries. So again, this is a way of advertising for us, of promoting us, and also a way of getting rid of they take a lot of our seconds and sometimes they're willing to pay for number one price for it. So that's another way of trying to maximize the amount of return from the small farm that we have. And this is kind of this is kind of an adjunct to that whole concept, and this is the Ugly Fruit program. We have that in our store. We get stuff that's cosmetically challenged, and one of the charges that is against us is that we're kind of an elitist program. In other words, we sell really, really good fruit for high prices to people that can afford it. Well, this counters that. We have seconds and cosmetically challenged and ugly fruit that we sell at our store, and it's the same fruit quality, same eating quality. It just has minor cosmetic problems, and it's very, very, it's cheaper than regular fruit at the grocery store. My last slide, these are the challenges. Sometimes I have to refer to them as existential issues, because some of them are. And I'll go through these very quickly. Water. During the drought years, we were actually cut off, and we had to buy fruit buy water from a local farmer that had a couple of wells. We get water from the water district. It's surface water that comes in from the San Felipe project or San Luis Reservoir, and we have to compete with the urban uses. And the cost is not so high, but it's the availability, the precarious nature of whether we have it or not, whether we get rationed or not. So water is going to be an issue, particularly in the future, because of the problems with, sometimes we have rain and sometimes we have drought. The next one, and probably the most critical one, and what I would call the most existential issue that we have, is climate change. Cherries, for example, cherry crops need a certain amount of winter chill, cold in the wintertime, to produce crops. If you don't get that, you don't get a crop. And because we're surrounded by urban uses now, pretty much, we're out there, I don't know if you've been there lately, but it seems like every day you go there and there's another house being built. The Borellos are pulling out, they're right next to us, they're pulling out their last bit of cherries this year and planting homes. And homes are a lot more profitable than apricots or cherries. So because of the pavement and chimneys and car exhaust and street lights and everything, it brings up the winter temperatures to the point where we cannot get a cherry crop. Now, I've had only one good cherry crop in 6 years. So to give you some, to relate that to maybe some of what you folks have, like you have a salary, maybe you're high tech and you make a couple $100,000 a year. Divide that by 6, and that's what our average income is. So that makes it really, really difficult. And there's no answer for that. There's no answer. You can't give me extra funding. It's not going to help. I mean, if you don't have fruit, you can't sell it. Our chronic problem has never been demand. There's tremendous demand for our fruit because we built the name. It's supply. There's not enough. There's not enough. And we've been planting some more acreage, but it's still, if you don't get a crop, you don't get a crop. Labor issues. I just want to touch on that a little bit. We have a labor force that are primarily live on the ranch, and they're happy with that. They get free housing. This is our permanent labor force. When you have to pick cherries, you have to hire a contractor from the other valley. There's just not enough labor around. Trying to have good labor in an area like this, in an urban area where you have higher cost of living, is very difficult. We pay our employees probably better than anybody else that has agricultural labor, but we don't have enough. We can't attract enough, and so there's some new laws on the books now where you have to pay. Used to be you have to pay overtime after 60 hours with agricultural labor, and now because some of our stuff is actually like packing is not agricultural labor. It's a 40-hour a week. So and our guys are used to picking in the morning, packing in the afternoon, and if they stop on the day with packing, they have a 40-hour week. And so this year in particular, I had to pay a huge amount of overtime. And the only way to get around that is to have a larger labor force and have people that are only packing and people that are only picking. However, there's not enough people to attract to have they want good jobs. I mean, we have some of our own people have gone into construction because that's where the money is. And that just segues into a higher cost of doing business. There's so many. The cost of fertilizer is higher here than in the Central Valley. The cost of trucking, the cost of tractor parts, just about everything you can think of is much higher. Creating markets, I think I've touched on that already. We've been quite successful at that, but we still have some fruit in our cooler that we can't sell. And it's excellent fruit, but it's still a work in progress in terms of finding people that want to make pies, or want to make preserves and jams, and things like that will take this kind of fruit. Consumer education. We have this American tradition is cheap food, and you have to kind of break that. And I think what's I guess called the foodie movement, for lack of a better term, has shown light on the fact that there is fruit that is, or there is food that is made in different ways that are special foods, and that would that people are willing to pay more for. Now, it's kind of hard to convince people when they come in the store that to pay $7 a pound for fresh cherries when they know they can get fresh cherries at Safeway for $2 a pound. But we have to tell them what the difference is. Now, what we do with our fresh fruit and pre-ripen it, we actually go around that tree 5 or 6 times and just pick the fruit that's at the peak of ripeness. And then we have problems with, because we do that, we have a lot of wastage. A lot of fruit falls on the ground. So we're not as efficient as those guys that go in and tear into their orchards in the Central Valley and pick all at one time, pick green fruit. Those varieties have been designed to look good. They have a full blush to hide the fact that they're actually being picked green. In fact, I always tell a story about one time I was in the farmer's market and I had this Suncrest peach, which was a yellow peach, just yellow, has a little bit of blush. Young lady came up to me and she said, if I took this home, how long would it take it to ripen? Because she equated the redness with ripeness. And actually the reverse is true. If you have a red peach, you better be wary and turn it around and see what the ground color is, which is the color underneath the redness. Because if it's still kind of a greenish tinge, it's green. And you know, I've bitten in the supermarket fruit where it's like styrofoam. You bite into it and it breaks off in chunks. Ours is juicy. You know, the juice runs down your chin. It's a completely different product, and so you have to really convince these people that this is a different product and it's going to cost you more. Part of the purpose of the tastings and the orchard tours is to educate the consumers into this is something different. This is a specialty product. It's not a commodity that you can get anywhere else. Regulations. I'll just talk about one regulation. Spraying. Now, spraying, because we're near Live Oak High School, we're within a quarter mile, you have to spray at night during the weekdays. And it really limits our ability to do what we have to do. Whether you're organic or not, you have to do some spraying. And it causes a lot of other problems too. People call us in the middle of the night, say, you woke me up, you know, the noise, this and that. And what they've done with this legislation is taken away our judgment, our ability to spray when we think it's safe. And because sometimes at night it's super windy, and during the day it's nice. And it limits our ability to farm. There are also a lot of other regulations involved. There's food safety that has to be dealt with. Things, again, that my parents did not have to deal with. So in one generation, things have changed tremendously. Land values. You know, I think people buy homes, you know, if you buy a new home in Morgan Hill, they buy it with the expectation that land, that house is going to appreciate in value. But when you're dealing with farmland, and you know, I live on the farm. My house was built in 1914, and it's in various degrees of disrepair, depending on which room you go into. But it's valuable to me, and what the current trend is with you know, ag preservation is that agricultural land somehow is worth less than ones that are being developed. The Borello orchard, for example, and I'm very happy that they're able to develop because that's what they wanted to do. Me, I'm not so sure. I'd like to stay there as long as I can, but I don't want anybody to tell me how much that land is worth. The land is the value of the land is based on the potential for development. Unfortunately, their land is worth several million an acre. The county came to us, the county planning, the ag preservation planners said that they'll buy our land for, they won't buy it, they'll buy the development rights for $100,000 an acre. Now there's a certain amount of inequity there, it seems to me. I guess that's all I can say about that. So if there's any questions at this point, yes.
Hi. So Joe.